27 years, I dreamt of you. I craved you. I've missed you.
It Chapter 2 starts with a semi-recap of the ending of the first film. We take a glimpse of an extended look at the scene where the group makes their pact. The pact that ties them all together if it should ever return. Unfortunately, it was never killed, merely temporarily defeated. And here, we take our first gander of some of It Chapter 2's biggest problems. The CGI used to de-age the actors, regurgitating old and known information, and pacing that's a real slow burn. However, It Chapter 2 does prove to be satisfying by sticking to what made the original great. It Chapter 2 is an ambitious horror sequel, by the very fact that it's a nearly 3-hour long film, the kind of length usually reserved for epics. In a sense, It Chapter 2 is an epic of its own making. However, the film fails to justify its runtime by not leaning into the more crazier bits of its mythology, which makes the film overall feel less like an epic and more like an elongated horror fest. It is, however, a very entertaining horror fest, but likely one that won't hold up as much with repeated viewing. On the narrative side of things, It Chapter 2 has enough scenes to engender us back to its characters once more, who by the way are perfectly cast. However, once they start on their quest proper, it doesn't spend too much time developing its cast anymore. While some may argue that they have developed far enough as kids in the original film, and some of those characters here indeed do go through some development, others feel like they have gone through it less so, or none at all. The cast itself though leads us in with excellent performances throughout. James McAvoy and Bill Hader in particular especially pull far ahead of the cast, doing a lot with their roles and keeping true to their characters. While the other actors have some time to shine, particularly Chastain, not all of them have enough screen time or variety in their performances to pull ahead, although this variety, or lack thereof, is of course mainly due to It Chapter 2's reiterative writing. It Chapter 2 has a lot of flashbacks. In these flashbacks we see most of the problems that the film has. The reiteration of characters' personality traits, motivations, and most importantly, fears, are a bit rote and unneeded. Couple this with the fact that we know the kids aren't going to die, and the stakes, while incredibly terrifying, still feel on the whole a lot smaller. Although it doesn't stop from Pennywise's antics from being downright terrifying and the stuff of nightmares. We learn some new things and get treated to even more creative horror sequences in these flashbacks. However, it's also in these flashbacks we're also treated to what is arguably the worst part of the film, the CGI. At the very least, the CGI used to de-age the characters' faces is horrendous to the point you could imagine Pennywise coming up with this visual oddity to scare the ever-living daylights out of these characters. CGI is a cruel mistress, incredibly hard to wrap your head around, time-consuming, and more importantly, dwells in the valley of the uncanny. When we see the actors in their flashbacks and are treated with these de-aged faces, while some of them are done decently, mostly attributed to the fact that the kid in question didn't change much, the others are downright distracting. This comes into full obvious form with Ben and Richie's kid actors. These kids are not only taller, thinner, and ganglier, they don't look like kids anymore. And when you see Ben's face for the first time, it's entirely off-putting. This kid is taller and thinner, yet we are seeing a 12 to 13-year-old per-toned face smack dab on his obviously skinnier body. Now, of course, seeing the kids be older would have been too off-putting as well, and it's the one conceit the film had to justify, and the one conceit I'm willing to look past. One is left to wonder, however, if the middle ground would have been to gather some look-alike children's stunt doubles and replace their faces. At the very least, you wouldn't be seeing a kid's face plastered on someone who's already a teenager. Something that would be very akin to a face swap. If done properly with a proper Hollywood budget, more likely than not, it would have resulted in something better. Now at this point you may be thinking that I hate this film a lot with all the criticisms I've been coming up with. But I do think the film has its successes, and I do think that they do outweigh its failures. The CGI, for example, when not concerned with the de-aged faces, comes in various forms that Pennywise transforms into, and while it's technically not the best, the monsters, looking obviously fake, and the animation feeling a bit off, makes the CGI come across as being something right in the middle of the uncanny valley, however, given the fact that some things look kind of realistic. The good mixed with the bad of the CGI gives the film an even creepier vibe. When Pennywise takes his various forms, you'll be off-put by something that looks fake but eerily realistic. It's incredibly creepy and adds to the horror of the film. Another thing that adds to the creepiness is the cinematography. The cinematography, while not as inventive as the original, is still on the whole adequate. But once it leans into the horror machinations of Pennywise, the inventiveness of the angles helps pull you in to receive the full effect of the horror. The camera knows when to put you in the perspective of Pennywise's victims, be it the killings that start again or the losers themselves. It leads to some downright chilling moments that come and pull together just in time for a very enticing mix in the film's nearly 1 hour finale. Now you may be off-put by my assertion that the finale lasts a whole hour, but be rest assured you'll get your money's worth and you won't have a heart attack. Once the movie pulls into its second half, we see some truly great and amazingly horrific things. Whether it's Billy's sequence in the Mirror Funhouse or the finale itself, It Chapter 2 becomes an wholly terrifying experience that makes you dread what comes next. Here we get to see what pulls It Chapter 2 ahead of the first in terms of its finale. We see the Losers Club's fears fully manifest, for they are far deeper and far more psychological this time, and deal with some things that may actually be triggering to some of the viewers. It's also here where the film leans into some of its humor more heavily, which works in its favor to lighten the prospects and bring some levity to the proceedings. After all, being scared for an hour straight might have been a bit too much. Thankfully, the film knows when to inject its humor and when to keep it at bay, giving actors like Bill Hader a whole range to work with that is wholly impressive and most importantly believable and true to their characters as a child. Although that is not to say there is one sequence that involves a surprise injection of a song that doesn't really land. Besides this scene, however, the humor works in the film's favor more often than not, with its mix of humor, incredibly cinematic horror sequences, and a story that, while faltering in pacing, remains on the whole interesting. It all works to deliver a conclusion that, while a bit predictable, is satisfying. At this point, to go into more would be to give away the minutiae of the film. But be rest assured that It Chapter 2 is a film. At this point, to go into more would be to give away the plot of the film. But be rest assured that It Chapter 2 is a film that, while held back by its lack of editing, still comes ahead to come up almost evenly with the first film. While It Chapter 2 struggles to set the pieces down for its finale, once it does, its last hour is a non-stop horror house adventure thrill ride filled with scares, laughs, while Chapter 1 still comes ahead due to its deft understanding of its source material and knowing what to cup and what to keep. Chapter 2 comes up front on the effectiveness of its scares, which are far more varied and deeper given the fact that the adults are no longer kids. In the end, It Chapter 2 is a film about being yourself and the fear that comes with that. It's not until the losers accept who they are, and thus accept who Pennywise is, are they able to do anything in regards to hurting the clown. Whether you're fat, shy, gay, weak, strong, attractive, or unattractive, you are who you are, and your ownership of who you are is your strength. It's your shield against the world, and for those who seek to hurt you. It'll be your lightning rod to sweep them away, cowering them back into the shadows from whence they came. It Chapter 2 is wholly recommended, even if just for the fact that we won't be getting a horror film like this for quite some time.